There was a surfer. He went down to the beach in Northern California and went out to the beach. And before he began to surf, he said that he went over to the edge of the beach early in the morning. And he just sat down and stuck his surfboard in the sand. And he said he just sat there, kind of studying the way that the sea is moving. Just kind of study the waves. But he said he got caught up in the moment as he was studying the waves and the sea. He started realizing what a great creator that it must have been when he just created everything. And he started reflecting on God and how much power that the sound of his voice, he created everything that is. And he says he just looked around at the ocean and just looked. And it's this great mass of water. And then he says, then it stops right here. And then there's this great mass of land. And he just said he just sat there, and instead of going out to surf, he just said he really took that moment to meditate and think about our Savior, our Creator, and how wonderful He is. He said it was that time that he spent with God that he just said, he started his day off right. It was early in the morning. He's ready to surf. But it was even better taking time with God. He said he was able to do that and just look at the creation. And I've told you guys that before. If you're in a relationship and, first time Tina and I met, we didn't know anything about each other. I talked to her on the phone and invited her. I told her that I had her day planner. And I told her I would come and bring her day planner to her. We've never met. She said she'd come pick it up. I found this day planner in the middle of the street, if you don't know the story. During that conversation, the entire time, I was thinking that this person named Tina was an 80-year-old lady. Because in that day planner, when you open it up, there's a picture of 4 ladies. And they're all around 70s and 80 years old. And that's who I thought I was talking to. Even though the voice on the phone sounded like a 5-year-old kid. And I'll go ahead and jump a little bit to this. Later on, as Tina and I met each other, we've learned that she cannot order pizza. In fact, she can't order anything over the phone. Because when she orders it, the person on the other end goes, okay, can I talk to your mommy or daddy? So every time she ordered pizza, she couldn't do it. So I always order pizza. So with that day planner, and I close it up, and she finally says, she's going to come over. Well, I didn't know anything about this girl or this woman. I didn't know who she was, but by her voice. But after that, she pulls up, and she told me about 30 minutes because she's coming from Irvine to Huntington Beach, and I knew it was going to be some time. So about that time, I walk outside, and somebody's driving around the neighborhood. There's this cool Corvette. Black Corvette just comes out and then takes a turn and drives down the street, and I'm like, wow, that's a nice Corvette. Then a minute, that Corvette comes back and then goes back that way. I'm like, wow. Nice Corvette again. And then it comes back again, and it stops in front of my house. And then this girl gets out. She obviously saw me and wanted to stop and talk. It's the muscle. It's the muscles. So whenever she stops, she says, "Are you Paul?" And I was like, dude. She looks at me and knows my name. Remember, I'm looking for an 80-year-old lady. All right. Now one kid goes, "You are going to marry an 80-year-old lady?" I'm like, okay, follow the story. I thought it was an 80-year-old lady. It wasn't. So Tina gets out of the car. She's somewhere in her 20s. I forgot exactly. Somewhere in her 20s, has a Corvette, and she gets out of the car. And life changed for me ever after. Okay. We'll just say that. So we fall madly in love, and she loves me right away. She asked me to marry her right there, and I'm not. Wow, she's not in here. I can say anything I want to. This could be my story. This is the way I heard it in my head. It's the way I read into it. So, Carter, you still awake? Okay, you got the earplugs in. All right. He's watching us live on YouTube. I know, that's why you got the headset in. All right. So anyway, so besides that, so from that moment on, we began to learn more about each other. And then it was 3 weeks, 3 painful weeks, because she didn't call me or anything, and we didn't actually know we were going to start dating. But after 3 weeks, she finally did call me after I'd sent her threatening letters. But I'm saying, please call me. No, I did send her a letter. I sent her 2 Disneyland tickets, and she did reply back. So you know what, guys? If you just send girls Disneyland tickets, they'll finally call. I've found out. That's the way to do it. Yeah. So I sent her Disney, but we still have those Disneyland tickets, by the way. We still have them, and they're still in the envelope that I sent. It's postmarked and everything. So we never used them, and I pulled them out the other day just to look at them, because one of those things you just like. $35 a ticket was what it cost to go to Disneyland for the day. Isn't that crazy? I mean, what is it now? It's $1,000 now. Yeah, that'll be by the time our kids are grown. Yes, but yeah, it's funny how much it was. It was only $35. So anyway, so with that, the reason I say that is because a relationship began with us talking on the phone, and then from that talking on the phone, meeting in person, and then from meeting in person. There was that lull kind of a thing where 3 weeks, nothing happens. You don't talk to each other. Just that communication's not clear. And then all of a sudden you're going on dates. And then all of a sudden you're spending your life together. She invited me over to cook dinner one day. So she was going to cook me dinner. Now this was not knowing each other, for one. We don't know each other well. We've only been dating maybe a couple weeks, whatever it was. So she invites me over for dinner. She's going to cook. First time I'm ever going to taste her cooking, which is a good thing to know right away. I haven't met her family. We have spent almost every day driving around. I mean, she has a Corvette, dude. We're not going to stop driving around. I kept saying, okay, Florida, it's very close. I'm like, New York, come back, hit San Diego. I mean, we're in a Corvette, right? So I told you guys there was a story about this Corvette. They thought I was just going to give the Corvette up. They saw it back there and go, what? That's the Corvette. That's why we won't get rid of it. It has meaning. It's not running right now, but it has meaning. So we're gonna hang out together and stuff for a while, and then so nobody knows me yet. I'm the new guy. What I don't know is because we're spending so much time together. We're spending so much time together that her friends are not spending any time with her whatsoever. No longer is she spending time with her girlfriends. Well, what happens when girlfriends don't spend time with their friend? They start thinking, and that's dangerous for girls. They start thinking, and when they start thinking, they start panicking, and then when they start panicking, they start calling everybody, and when they start calling everybody, I'm sitting down to dinner, to this nice dinner that this girl that I've just met for a couple of weeks now has made me. It was a nice steak size. My wife says I say this wrong, but you'll know what I'm talking about. It's salmon. Did I say that pretty close? Salmon. Salmon. Yeah, that's how you say it, huh? I like the L. I like putting the L in there. Salmon. And it's salmon, however you say it. Nice thing. I don't like fish. We haven't got to that part in our relationship, but I'm going to eat it because she made it for me. And we eat fish when somebody made it for you. And it was a big piece. It wasn't the small piece. And I'm looking at that. And I'm looking at that, and I'm enjoying it because I'm in like relationship right now. Love, right? I mean, love makes you eat anything. You're like, fish, I don't like it, but boy, that's good stuff. So I'm in this love relationship, right? And I'm starting to I'm just going to eat it. And then there's that girlfriends talking to everybody, calling everybody. Well, you know what they do when they don't communicate well, and then they start talking to everybody. They finally call mom and dad of the daughter, and then say, your daughter has been off with some guy, and we don't know where they've been. We haven't heard from them for days and days. And then dad comes in going, boom, boom, boom. I hear the door slam, blam, blam. And all of a sudden there's this guy in front of my face going, where's my daughter? Right there. In the kitchen. Getting something out of the refrigerator. With a 5-year-old voice, yes. Tina comes over and she goes, oh, hi, Mom and Dad. We're just sitting down for dinner. You want anything to eat? He goes, this is Paul. This is my dad. Hi. It's kind of awkward if you don't put your hand up to mine. He just looked at me. Where have you been? People are worried about you. They haven't seen you for days. I'll just sit down right here. Yep, you handle that one. That's your dad. And I got closer to God in that moment than I've ever been. I'm like, God, if you get me out of this house alive, I will never sin again. I will never date again. Dating is out of the question. So fortunately for that, Tina and I made it through that, and I figured if we made it through that and I made it out alive, that she was the girl for me. And so we eventually, we got married, as you guys know. That's good because we have 3 kids, so that would really mess up the ministry if we didn't. So we have the 3 kids, right? So we're married, everything. But in that relationship, she learned that fish is not one of my greatest foods. However, I have learned that the way she cooks it, it's actually good. Even still being in love, as I am, the fish still tastes good whenever she makes it. But however, I found out that she actually only cooked that one meal. I don't know what she did to it, but she doesn't cook. And she had all this cool stuff. I mean, she has all the cookware. She goes, oh, I have all the cookware and everything because I took a cooking class and decided I didn't like it. So yeah, that was interesting. So I cook a lot. And then she found out that I put mayonnaise on every food there is. So we learn things. I have learned to like some fish, though. I'm not totally opposed to all fish. Just the smelly ones I don't like. So anyway, besides that, that's a relationship growing. You grow into your relationship. And so that's what is so wonderful about our God. It's a relationship that he has with us. It's not an imaginary thing. It's not something that you bow down and worship or put food in front of and you're bowing down to a true and living God. And that's what's so wonderful. And that's what this surfer was finding out when he got out there. Even though he may have known God, it's that time that you spend that you just sit back and see all that he's done. And I've told you guys this. The Bible doesn't have to tell you everything about God for you to know him. The Bible tells us that God created everything. So if God created everything, look at the creation and see what he likes, who he is. Look at the things he's done. I mean, sometimes we get caught here on planet Earth and we kind of think this is all he created, but then we start reading about all these other galaxies that's out there. That's so cool. Then look at all the other galaxies and they haven't found any life except for here, true life. I know they keep trying to find stuff, but you know what? God loves us enough to just make us so different and so in our own little world that he made us. And you look at that, and then look at all the different colors that he likes. He gave everybody different eyes, different colors skin, tall, short. He likes short people the best. I know I've read that somewhere. And then it's just amazing what God has created. And then you can see that, you know what? He's not one of those gods that's just, okay, I found one way to do it and I'm going to keep doing it that way. There's only one thing that he created that I've seen that he likes it one way and the only way. And that's the fact of salvation is only through Jesus Christ, and that's it. The rest he has he just creates everything. He creates circles, he creates squares, he creates green, he creates blue, he creates all these different shapes and colors. He creates little bitty things that you need a microscope and then a microscope on top of a microscope to be able to see. It's so cool. And then he creates these things so far away from us that we can't see it until we send out like a satellite thing to find it. And then it's cool. I kind of lost you on that one, I think. But that's the kind of God we serve. So this surfer, as he was sitting out there and he was seeing this, he was seeing the ocean and was really thinking about what God has done. So he went to go surfing. And this is especially good for Tim because Tim used to surf. And then he tried skydiving. I think if you don't go close enough to death surfing, you try skydiving. So, but Tim used to be a surfer. He used to tell me about all the stories that he had when they would spend all day surfing. I'm like, so actually, how do you make a living while you're out? Anyway, we won't go there. So this guy's surfing. He goes out and he says, after he got off the beach and he went to go surfing, it was amazing. He caught one of the greatest waves that he's ever been on. And he said, there was only like 20 people out there, 20 other surfers. And he caught this wave. And then he went back out and he caught another wave. And he goes, right after that, he caught 3 waves. Right after 1, 2, 3 waves. He goes, it was just one of the amazing times that he has. What he didn't realize while he was doing all of this was that he was continually going further and further out. He ended up 500 yards out. The ocean was beautiful. Everything's going great and wonderful. He looks around. There's actually only one other person that's near him. He'd gone so far away from the other people while he was surfing and just having this great moment of just surfing. And he said, you know what? It was really, really peaceful and wonderful. He said he was laying out there on his board and then his foot sort of struck something and he's like, what was that? Like as his foot was taken off his board. And then all of a sudden, he felt this bite come onto his side and grab him and pull him into the water. And as he's going into the water, he says he doesn't remember much, but he remembers taking his hand and looking into the eye of a shark. He said the eye of the shark was so big. And I'm like, if I was that close to a shark, I would think the eye was humongous too. So he says he took his fist and went around the side and punched him right on the side of the eye, and it's like hitting a brick wall. He says he continued, he says, but something happened. He goes, he doesn't know what happened, but he knows that he didn't hurt the shark. But for some reason, the shark let go of him. And whenever he let go of him, he looked at his board. His board was a ways away. So he swam out to his board, jumped onto his board, and began to swim. And then he started thinking. During that process of thinking, he started thinking, do I have legs? Do I have a rest of a body? He's swimming to shore, and then what's happening is he's losing all his energy. He's too afraid to look at the lower part of his body. He can't feel anything. He doesn't know. He's so overwhelmed with the moment of things going on. He's panicking and stressed and all the different things that happen in tragedy like this, and he won't look down. He just says he has arms and he's going to paddle. He just knows he has arms. And he keeps paddling. He starts wearing down. He looks around him and blood is all around him. And he realizes, you know what? He goes, I don't think I have all of my body parts. He looks out to the ocean, out from the ocean, and he realizes that the land is still about 500 yards away. He says, there's no way. And so he sees some surfers. Remember, most other surfers had already left. And he looked away and he saw a couple. And he started screaming out to him. He goes, he screamed with the loudest that he could. But he goes, his voice just wasn't loud enough to carry across those waves. And the pounding of the waves and also the wind and everything else that's out on the ocean. He goes, they couldn't hear him doing anything. They couldn't hear him screaming at all. He finally screamed enough that he sounded like a 5-year-old kid. He finally, his voice just went away. He couldn't even scream anymore. So help wasn't going to be on the way. He finally just laid on top of his board. And he waited. He couldn't get past the waves. He couldn't get through to the land. He just didn't have the energy. He says as he laid there, he said he could feel something different in the ocean. And he says, is that the shark coming back? And he says, if I'm going to die, I'm not going to die here. And he looked up and he said, I just started to paddle. And he goes, he paddled and he paddled and he goes, something came under my board. He goes, it was one of the strangest things. It came under my board and lifted me up and it took me up so high and it started going. And I realized it wasn't the shark. It was one of the greatest, most perfect waves that he's ever been on. He said it carried me all the way to the beach and just dropped me right there on the sand. He said it was perfect. See, whenever I heard him say this, and I read about it actually, when I read this, I was like, that's kind of like the disciples, in a sense, that the Bible tells us that whenever Jesus was with the disciples in the book of Acts, he came to the disciples and he said to them, you've seen all of this. You've seen me here on earth. You've seen them nail me to a cross. You saw me die, and now you see me now that I've rose from the dead. And you are to be my witnesses. You are to be my witnesses, and you are to go out and tell people that I am Christ, and that I've died and defeated death, and I will raise from the dead. And you are to tell them that. Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but you can read this in Acts and other books of the Bible as well. You are my witnesses. So when I was thinking about this, and I thought about this before, it's not like the first time I've thought about this. Well, who are we? We're the church body, but we're not witnesses to his death. We weren't there. We weren't there 2,000 years ago or so, where we witnessed him die, and then we'll walk on the earth, die, and then raise from the dead. We did not witness that. But the Bible tells us, in a couple places, one of them in Acts. First of all, let me go back to the disciples. It says, this Jesus, God's raised up again, to which we are all witnesses. That's what it says in Acts 2:22. And then Luke, it says, and he said to them, thus it is written that the Christ would be suffered and rise again from the dead the third day, and that repentance for forgiveness and sins would be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses to these things. And behold, I am sending forth the promise of my Father upon you. But you are to stay in the city until you are clothed with the power from on high. He's saying to the disciples to go out and be these witnesses. Now, there's something in Acts here that furthers on. In Acts, he talks to Saul. Saul is talking to Ananias. Saul is the one that sat there and saw Stephen be murdered. He saw to it that Stephen was murdered. He accepted it. Saul was the one going out and persecuting the Christians and killing them, having them killed. It never says that Paul himself killed. It just, he allowed it. He's the one that sort of set it all up. And so we know that. We don't actually know that Paul killed a Christian, but he did oversee it. And then, so as his name was Saul before he turned to Paul, Saul was on the way to Damascus to hurt other Christians, to attack them, pull them out of their houses and have them killed. On the way to Damascus, you know that a bright light came from Christ. And Christ spoke to him on the way to Damascus. And Christ said, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting? And at that moment, Saul spoke with Christ. Well, it was that time that Saul gave his life over to Christ. And it was that time that the revelation of who Jesus really was. Even though Saul thought he was doing the work of God, he realized through this moment with Christ, this relationship beginning. This is the beginning of a relationship. It's this beginning that they've just talked to each other. They're starting to learn about each other. And you're going to read throughout the scriptures how Jesus even brings Saul, which is later going to be Paul, takes Paul and shows him heaven, takes him to heaven as a live person, shows him what heaven's going to be like. Paul gives us that in Galatians. So we know that. But the beginning of this relationship is on a road to Damascus when this bright light shines and blinds him, and he's going to be blinded. And he tells him, I want you to go to Ananias. And then, Ananias is a Christian. Real good, God-fearing person. And God speaks to him too and says, hey, Saul is going to come and visit you. Isn't that great? The guy that kills Christians, you're going to send him to me. Wouldn't you like to have that kind of faith, huh? To be able to trust God with, you're going to send the guy that kills people to my house. All right. But it says here, at Acts 22, verse 11. But since I could not see, now this is Paul speaking, but since I could not see because of the brightness of the light, I was led by the hand by those who were with me and came into Damascus. A certain Ananias, a man who was devout by the standard of the law and well spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me, and standing near said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that very time I looked up at him, and he said, the God of our fathers has appointed to you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear an utterance from his mouth. And that's all that happened on the way to Damascus. Remember, he saw Christ. He heard the utterance from his mouth. So that's why we say that Paul was an apostle of Jesus Christ. To be an apostle of Jesus Christ means that Jesus Christ had to personally appoint you as an apostle. For you to be an apostle. Now we have different types of apostles today. Those aren't actually called by Christ in the flesh. All the apostles of the New Testament, they all were called by Christ personally in the flesh. Him seeing them face to face. So we know that. All right, so that's how Paul was called to be an apostle. And he's the only one that was called to be an apostle after the fact by Jesus Christ. So, Brother Saul, receive your sight. At the very moment, I looked up at him, and he said, the God of our fathers has appointed you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear an utterance from his mouth. Now, listen to this. For you will be a witness for him to all men of what you have seen and heard. Now, I don't know if where Paul was during the trial of Jesus and the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. I don't know about all that. But I do know this, that Paul was chosen after Christ was risen from the dead. This was Christ coming down and choosing Paul, and now Paul is going to be sent to the Gentiles and preach the gospel to the Gentiles. So this is where I laid up to this. Where are we to be witnesses for Christ if we weren't back there when Jesus died on the cross? He was laid in a grave. He rose from the dead. He spoke to them, but we weren't there. How can we be a witness to something that we couldn't see? We didn't experience. The truth is, you can't be a witness to that moment. So how are we to be a witness? Just like he was talking to Paul just now, Ananias was saying, God has chosen you to be a witness. God has chosen all of us to be a witness. So what are we going to witness? The witness that we have is the experience in the relationship that we have with God. We are to witness to people about what's happened to us, what has taken place in our life. Remember, there's a blind man in the Bible, and they questioned him, and they said, well, you were blind, and were you healed? And he said, I was healed by this man named Jesus. Well, what is he, a prophet? What is he? What did he say he was? He goes, I don't care about all that. He goes, once I was blind, and now I see. You call it what you want to. And that's really what it comes down to us. It's what has Christ done to us to show us that, hey, I didn't need to be there when he died on the cross. I didn't need to be there whenever he was placed in the grave and rose again. I didn't need to be there because right now I have the living Savior living inside of me. His Spirit lives inside of me. And there's some miraculous things that he's done in my life that is so great that I know that I can be an effective witness by just letting you know what he's done for me. Where's my witness? My witness is this, that what Christ has done for me, I was once blind and now I see. My daughter had lead poisoning and now she doesn't. My family was falling apart and now it's not. My finances were down and now it's together. I mean, whatever God has taken you through, you can continue going. My daughter was on her deathbed and now she is alive. Whatever it is. I know the testimonies of so many of you. And there's a witness inside of you that you need to tell the world about. This surfer, as he was going, and he took this wave, and this wave took him in and landed him on the beach. He went to he was laying on the sand. There was another surfer came over to him. And he said, okay, I'm going to get help. They start dialing 911, calling for help. They know that the help's going to come too late. Because this guy's bleeding out the side. His entire chunk of his side was taken out. An EMT happened to be on the beach. An off-duty EMT. He came over and he took his entire body and laid on top of his side. Just laid on top of him to stop the blood. As the surfer is screaming with pain. This EMT just calmed him down and said, if you're screaming because you can feel the pain, he goes, that's one of the best signs because you still have feeling. He laid there and applied the pressure and he applied the pressure and the pain got more intense. The pain hurt, and he's screaming and screaming. All of a sudden, someone came up in a car. They took him out. They said, we can't wait for the ambulance. They took him out. They put him in a car. The EMT kept his body laying on top of his body. Kept him laying there in the car. They met the ambulance partway. Got him over into the ambulance, got all the way to the hospital. The doctors took him into the emergency room, started doing all the work, and later on they said the bite marks from this were over a foot long. They said, but they missed all of your vital arteries. All your vital parts were missed. They go, that was total luck. He looked at the doctors and said there was a big wave that picked me up when I couldn't swim any longer, when I didn't know if I was going to live or die. And it lifted me up and it placed me on the beach. And then after that, there was people that came over and helped me, and there were people that knew what to do. And then I ended up meeting up with an ambulance, and I came to this point, and I come into a emergency room where you tell me that the bite marks were just within inches of my death. He goes, it wasn't luck. He goes, it was God. He goes, God lifted me up when I couldn't go any longer. And He placed me in a place and sent me people to rescue me. He goes, He sent me to a hospital where you could take care of me. And then you could confirm without a shadow of a doubt that it was so close. Everything was so close to taking my life. But the God in heaven said, that's as far as you can go. You can't take His life. Why is that so important? It's because God has never promised us that we wouldn't go through trials and hard times. He's never promised that. I've told you that before. God's promise to us is He will go with us through it. He says that He'll go with us. He'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. He'll continue along with us. But here's something else that you can depend on. That not only is He going to go with you, but it's just like that when He was 2,000 years ago, He was crucified on the cross. Remember, the witnesses were there watching this. His disciples were watching this. And they thought everything was over. They placed Him in a grave, and then He rose again on the third day. Remember the tragedy, the defeat, and then the victory. The same thing in our life. We don't have to be there that long ago to see all of that happen, to be a witness. Whenever you go through these trials and these hard times in this regular life that everybody else goes through, depend on God and know that He will lift you up when you need to be lifted up. He will take you to safety when you need to be taken to safety. And He will confirm that He was there with you the entire time through everything that you've been through. And then from that moment on, as the Bible even told Saul, you are to be the witness for God and go out and tell the world what He's done for you. That's why you hear so many times about my wife and I, how we met. That's how God started our life with our family. How many times I share with you the story of my children and the things that went on in their life where we had to pray for God to intervene and help us. The things about our finances where I had to pray and ask God to intervene. It's my witness. It's my testimony. It's to tell you, I know for sure that God is real. I know for sure that God is inside of me. I know for sure that God overpowers everything and that all things work together for good for those who love Him. Amen. I know that there's a few of you out there that you're going through things that you don't tell me. I know that. You don't need to tell me. I don't have anything. But I'll tell you this. You need to tell God. He wants to know. It's like, if you don't like eating fish, tell Him you don't like eating fish. Right? I say this as I'm looking over at a fisherman over here. Sorry about that. I should look to this side when I say that. But I say this because you're in a relationship with God. You know, tell God, you know what? These are the things about me that I think you should know. Even though God already knows it, God knows all about you. But let him know. So whenever he answers you, say, wow, you heard me. You heard what I said. When I found that my daughter had lead poisoning, remember we couldn't figure out how got lead poisoning? How she got it. And I prayed. It wasn't that God needed me to pray to him to tell her that my daughter had lead poisoning. I needed to know that I told God that she had lead poisoning. Because whenever God speaks to me and says, Paul, turn around, and I mean, it was like the clearest voice I've heard, Paul, turn around. It's because I was praying and I was asking God. I was in a classroom full of people. And I'm like, God, why are you doing this to my daughter? Why are you allowing this to happen? And it's because of me praying, something God already knew. It's like, okay, Paul, we've talked about this. Now turn around. And I turn around and the person behind me is wearing a lead cross that they made at camp. And it's because of me praying that God cleared it up to say, now you can turn around. We've got this conversation going. Now turn around and see where the lead's coming from. It was a lead cross that they made at camp, and the kids brought them back here. And when they brought them back here, my daughter would play with the kids would hold her. My daughter would be right here playing with the lead cross, put it in her mouth, whatever. And that's how she got the lead poisoning. But it's because of me communicating with God that he was able to reveal it to me understand what he's doing. Otherwise, had I not been praying, had I not been talking to God, I would have turned around, saw my friend, shook my friend's hand, whatever. Maybe not even turn around. But the cross wouldn't have been the key that I was driven to. But it's because I was praying. That's why I say, whatever it is in your life, you say, you know what, I have some issues with God, or I don't know what God's doing in my life. Shout it out to God. Tell God and let him reveal the answer to you. When he reveals it to you, it's because you've been praying. And he says, hey, I hear you. I know what you're talking about. And then he opens it up and you say, I just prayed about that. Ask with your mouth. Talk to him with your mouth. And then listen with your ears and your heart. And you'll be amazed at the relationship and the strength. And then go out and be a witness. Go out and tell everybody. And tell the story over and over and over. Even if they get tired of it. I know you guys are tired of hearing that lead story. But man, it's a witness. It's a witness that my God's real. And it's the one testimony I have that it's like Paul on the way to Damascus when that light blinded him. It's my path that God just stopped me and said, okay, here's the answer. I'm going to reveal it to you right now. It's a revelation from Jesus that I can keep forever. So go out and be a witness for Jesus Christ. And that's how we grow this church and grow the kingdom of God. We'll do that in all his